What really happens when you vanish? Not with drama, but with silence. What do they feel when your presence, once taken for granted, suddenly evaporates? This isn't revenge. It's revelation, and it cuts deeper than you think. Have you ever wondered what truly happens when you disappear, not in a storm of slammed doors or tearful goodbyes, but in a quiet final act of detachment? No warnings, no farewells, just stillness. You stop being available. You stop chasing. You stop explaining yourself into exhaustion, and when you're no longer around, and they finally begin to miss you, did they ever really value you to begin with? This isn't about manipulation. It's not about playing emotional chess or crafting drama. What we're talking about here is far more profound. It's about reclaiming your energy. It's about honoring the rare, irreplaceable soul you are, and no longer offering yourself to those who treated your presence like it was endless, like you were some eternal light switch they could flick on and off whenever it suited them. This isn't a slow fade. This is a clean break, a total disappearance. And what it triggers is nothing short of an emotional earthquake. Because for the first time, the people who relied on your consistency, who fed off your patience and warmth, are forced to feel the full weight of your absence. They didn't think you had it in you. Not after all those months, maybe even years, of being their safe harbor. You were the one who always answered, always forgave, always understood, even when they didn't deserve it. They told themselves a comfortable story. You needed them more than they needed you. You chased, they ran, you gave, they received, they were the prize. And you? Just the persistent admirer. But then, you vanished. No grand announcement, no final confrontation, no desperate plea for closure, just silence. And in that silence, everything shattered. Because this wasn't punishment, this was truth. The person they counted on to tolerate their moods, their indifference, their inconsistency is simply gone, without warning. And now, for the first time, they feel the sting of rejection, the raw burn of losing something they assumed would always be there. They didn't expect to miss you. They thought your absence would be a minor inconvenience, just another name lost in the shuffle. After all, weren't they the ones with all the options? The backup plans? The admirers? But nothing replaces the gravity of what you gave them. Nothing compares to your presence. The warmth, the realness, the unspoken understanding. You were the one who remembered their hidden pains, the one who celebrated their victories without jealousy, the one who held them in their lowest moments without judgment. Now everything feels hollow. Their conversations? Shallow. Their new connections? Surface level. Their phone screen? Just names and empty chats, none of them echoing the depth you once brought effortlessly. And this isn't just about missing your company. It's about missing the version of themselves that only existed around you. You brought out something raw in them. Kindness, vulnerability, truth. And now, with you gone, that version of them feels lost too. And the silence, it doesn't just echo, it torments. Where did you go? Who are you now? And what does it mean that they can no longer reach you? In the next section, we'll dive deeper into the uncomfortable shift in power and how your absence flips the narrative they built to protect their ego. After the silence shakes their world, something even more unsettling creeps in, a storm of questions they never used to ask. What are you doing? Where did you go? Who are you with? These weren't questions that ever occupied their mind when you were always available, when you answered quickly, shared openly, and gave without hesitation. Back then, you were easy to read, predictable, safe. They didn't have to wonder about your life beyond the borders of their own attention. But now you're a mystery they can't solve, and it's driving them mad. The absence of your updates becomes unbearable. They refresh your social media pages like addicts craving a fix. They dissect your last seen status, read into the timing of your posts, and obsess over any photo, quote, or emoji you leave behind. Every mutual friend suddenly becomes a potential informant. Every casual mention of your name sends a jolt through their chest. Their imagination runs wild. 1,000 vivid stories playing on a loop, each one more torturous than the last. Are you healing? Are you glowing? Have you found someone who cherishes you the way they never could? The silence becomes more agonizing than any fight you ever had. And no, this curiosity isn't romantic. It's panic disguised as interest, because for the first time, they've lost control. You're no longer predictable, no longer available, no longer theirs to understand. The person they once believed they had figured out is now unreachable, and maybe always was. And slowly, a terrible realization dawns. They never truly knew you. They only knew the version of you who bent to their needs. The patient one, the giving one, the one who put out emotional fires they caused without ever letting them feel the heat. But who are you when you're not managing their chaos? Who are you when you're not shrinking yourself to make them comfortable? This new version of you, the one who doesn't explain, doesn't chase, doesn't ask, both fascinates and terrifies them. And then comes the moment they can't escape. Reflection. Guilt begins to rise, quiet at first, like water creeping under a closed door, but soon it floods everything. Did I ruin this? The question grows louder and louder until it's deafening. Without you around to soften the blow, to justify their actions or take the blame, they're left to face the brutal truth. They were the problem. So they start replaying it all in their mind. The times they dismissed your feelings, the times they mocked your vulnerability, the times they chose others while expecting you to wait in the shadows. Each memory is sharper now, each moment of casual cruelty clearer. Each time they made you feel too much for asking for basic love and respect, now it hits differently. They remember the way your light began to dim, how you stopped asking, how you stopped shining, just to keep them comfortable. And finally, the crushing truth settles in. They didn't just lose someone who loved them, they lost someone good, someone rare, someone who saw every flaw they tried to hide and chose to love them anyway. And what did they do with that gift? They wasted it. And now, panic takes the wheel. They start chasing, the roles are reversed. Suddenly, you're the one with the power, and they feel the longing, the anxiety, the emptiness you once lived with. They reach out. Late-night texts filled with apologies and vague promises, likes on old photos hoping to spark nostalgia, comments laced with half-truths and emotional bait, desperate for a reply. Any reply. Their messages swing wildly. One moment angry, the next pleading. One message blaming you, the next begging you back. But you say nothing. And your silence, it is not cruel, it is clarity. Because now you understand what they never did. Words without changed behavior mean nothing. And as your silence deepens, something even more powerful begins to grow. Your self-worth, untangled from their approval. As their regret deepens, your silence no longer confuses them. It defines everything they never truly understood about your worth. They now realize something heartbreaking. They shouldn't have needed to lose you to finally appreciate you. But you've already learned the truth. You know that chasing someone who keeps running from commitment doesn't lead to love. It leads to emptiness, exhaustion, and self-abandonment. You're no longer the person who waited, who begged, who explained. And your distance isn't some calculated move or tactic. It's not a strategy, it's evolution. You've outgrown the need for their approval. Their panic feels foreign now, like watching someone frantically search for an object you've long since let go of. You see them scrambling, desperate for something they once overlooked. But you no longer need what they're offering. You've stepped into peace, and now they're the ones stuck in the loop of unanswered messages and silence that echoes. They feel what you once felt, caring too much for someone who no longer needs them. They feel the cold side of one-sided effort. Irony, isn't it? They're now pouring into the space you used to fill with love. They offer attention, affection, urgency, all the things you once hoped for, but it's too late. Not because you're bitter, but because you've transformed. You're not the same person who walked away. You're the version of yourself who finally remembered their worth. And while they struggle to reconcile this shift, they try to convince themselves it's freedom. No more guilt, they whisper. No more expectations. They believe they're free of the weight you once carried for both of you. But the illusion doesn't last long, because freedom without meaning is just emptiness with a prettier name. That weight they shrugged off, it returns heavier than ever, as they start to feel the hollowness of shallow connections. Other people don't compare. New flings don't touch the depth you brought. Everything else feels like fast food after they've tasted a home-cooked meal made with love. They realize you were never a burden. You were an anchor, the one who kept them grounded, the mirror that reflected their better self. the safe harbor where they could be real, messy, and vulnerable without shame. They didn't gain freedom. They lost home. It's like drinking salt water when dying of thirst. It looks like relief, but only deepens the ache. The regret becomes their silent companion. They see couples in public and remember the way you looked at them. They hear stories about loyalty and think of your quiet, constant support. They witness genuine love and finally understand what you were offering all along. But by the time the understanding arrives, you're already gone. You've stopped waiting for recognition. You've stopped needing their love to prove your worth. You've become whole without their validation. And in their panic, they shift from remorse to strategy. Now the game begins. Manipulation cloaked in performance. They post curated photos surrounded by others, craft captions designed to spark your jealousy, try to make it seem like they're thriving without you. But it's a game that fails, spectacularly. Because they don't realize something critical. You're not watching anymore. You've stopped checking their stories. You've unfollowed the digital stage where they perform. You've disappeared so completely, their attempts to provoke you vanish into silence. And that silence, it devastates them because they've lost their audience. The one person whose reaction they craved. The one person who used to feel every move they made. Now they play games to empty seats. No applause. No attention. No response. Mutual friends no longer report back to you because you've stopped asking. Their messages through others fall flat because you've closed the door. Their drama fizzles because you refuse to participate. They're playing chess with themselves while you're already living in a world where that game doesn't matter, a world where your value isn't decided by their attention, where your joy isn't conditional, where your peace no longer bends to the turbulence of their emotions. And in that world, your silence is deafening. To them, it's louder than every argument you ever had, because they were used to your reactions. Even your anger meant they still mattered. Even your tears meant you still cared. But now, there are no tears, no explanations, just a quiet strength they never imagined, and a new chapter where you rise without them. They once feared your anger, but now it's your silence that leaves them haunted. Your frustration once meant something. It meant you still cared, enough to fight, to argue, to try. Even in conflict, there was connection. But silence? Silence is something else entirely. Silence is not loud, it's not explosive, it's final. It is the sound of someone who no longer needs to be heard because they've already let go. Now they sit in the echo of that silence, and it crushes them. Every text they send, unanswered. Every call, ignored. Every attempt at reconnection, swallowed by the same quiet void. And that void, it forces them to do something they never had to do when you were there. Sit with their own thoughts. Face their own actions. Listen to the loud echo of everything they said and everything they didn't. Let them remember. Let them replay every careless word. Every time they made you wait. Every time they chose someone else, convinced you'd still be there when they got bored. Your silence becomes a mirror, one they can't look away from, one that reflects the consequences of their choices, sharp and unfiltered. You used to beg for closure. You wanted them to explain, to apologize, to say something that would make the pain make sense. But now, your silence is the closure. It says more than words ever could. You're not bitter. You're not broken. You're not hoping for change. You're done. And in that stillness, they begin to learn a lesson they never understood while you were present. That absence can hurt more than presence. That indifference can cut deeper than anger. That the sound of someone walking away, truly walking away, can echo louder than any scream. They start to fear your silence more than they ever feared your tears. Because tears meant there was still a chance. But silence? Silence means it's over. It means you've crossed into something they can't reach, transformation. And now fear settles in. Not panic, not pride. Fear, real, soul-deep fear. Because now they realize they didn't just lose your attention. They lost you. They lost the person who knew them at their core, who held their secrets, who forgave their failures, who loved them in ways they never fully understood until now. And suddenly their pride? Useless. What's the point of being emotionally untouchable when no one is left to be touched by it? So they beg, they cry, they promise change with a desperation that would have broken your heart months ago. Now they offer everything you once asked for: commitment, consistency, clarity. But it doesn't move you anymore. Not because you're cruel, but because you've changed. You don't need what they're offering because you've given it to yourself. You've learned self-commitment. You've created your own emotional consistency. You've become your own sanctuary. The person who once longed for their love is no longer starving. You are full of self-respect, self-worth, and peace. Their desperation doesn't feel like validation anymore. It feels like watching someone mail a heartfelt letter to the wrong address. You see now, they're not fighting for you. They're fighting the pain of losing control. They're wrestling with their ego, not your absence. They're reacting to discomfort, not offering real transformation. Because real love doesn't need loss to wake up. True appreciation doesn't arrive too late, and genuine commitment doesn't need fear to spark action. What they offer now is only a reflection, a shadow of what you deserved when you still believed in shadows. You've left the game entirely. You've stopped investing in people who only show up when they're losing you. And most importantly, you've returned to yourself. You didn't just disappear from their life, you reappeared in your own. And in that return, you've undergone the most profound transformation of all. You're no longer contorting yourself to fit into someone else's emotional blueprint, no longer dimming your light to keep them comfortable, no longer managing their feelings while silencing your own. The fog they created with mixed signals has finally lifted. And in that clarity, you see the truth. You weren't asking for too much. You were accepting too little. You weren't too sensitive. You were responding like any person would to being undervalued. Now, you've stopped begging for focus. You give it to yourself. You don't seek their validation. You found your worth in your own integrity. You no longer chase approval because you approve of yourself. And this new independence, it's not cold. It's not closed off. It's radiant. You haven't become incapable of love. You've become intentional with it. You're not guarded. You're discerning. You haven't lost your ability to care. You've simply stopped caring for those who won't care for themselves or for others. By the time they realize who you've become, it's no longer someone they can reach. The person they're trying to win back, she's no longer available because she no longer exists in the form they remember. She's grown. She's risen. She has become a woman who recognizes her worth without needing permission. She doesn't fight for crumbs, doesn't beg to be chosen, doesn't tolerate confusion dressed as love. Now she chooses peace over chaos, clarity over mixed signals, truth over potential. She no longer sees love as something to be earned through struggle. She understands what so many forget, that being cherished shouldn't be a reward for endurance. It should be the standard. Letting them feel her absence wasn't an act of vengeance. It was an act of clarity. Letting them carry the weight of their choices wasn't cruelty. It was accountability. She no longer shields them from consequences, no longer softens the edges of their behavior. Because protecting someone from their own patterns only delays their awakening. This is what emotional independence looks like. To love without losing yourself, to care without surrendering your peace, to be kind without being a convenience, to be open without being available to those who haven't earned it. And in the most powerful twist of all, the moment she disappeared from their life, she reappeared in her own. While their world quietly unraveled, hers finally began to bloom. The energy once spent trying to be understood now fuels a life that speaks for itself. The time once wasted decoding inconsistency now invests in people who speak love fluently without leaving her guessing. The love once poured into someone who couldn't hold it now flows toward those who mirror it back, equally and freely. Let them miss her. Let them drown in the silence they once ignored. Let them finally understand what they had and how carelessly they let it slip away. Their regret is not her burden. Their late recognition is not her reward. Because she has moved on, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. She no longer walks away from love. She walks toward love, real love. The kind that doesn't require a breakdown to be awakened, the kind that matches her energy, that honors her effort, that values her presence while she's still present. This was never about making them suffer for their mistakes. This was about ending the suffering she endured for their mistakes. This isn't revenge, it's self-respect. Because when you disappear from people who never saw your light, you become visible to those who do. When you stop being available to those who took you for granted, You become magnetic to those who will never make that mistake. When you leave the places that made you small, you step into the spaces that celebrate your expansion. Your disappearance wasn't the ending. It was the beginning, not of their regret, though that may come, but of your remembering. The moment you finally knew, you were never meant to chase love. You were meant to embody it, command it through your quiet strength, inspire it through your authenticity, sustain it through mutual respect. Let them feel the silence. Let them carry the weight. Let them learn what you already have, that some doors once closed never open again. Not because you're unforgiving, but because you found better rooms to walk into. Your power was never in making them want you. It was in remembering that you were always worth wanting. And now, beautifully, finally, you've come home to yourself. You didn't just vanish from their life. You reappeared in your own, brighter, stronger, more radiant than ever before. And this time, you're not leaving.